Rome, October 2nd, 2025, Italy's Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani addressed Parliament today with a measured yet firm statement on the interception of the Gaza-bound Sumud Flotilla by Israeli naval forces. Speaking before lawmakers at the Chamber of Deputies, Tanjani emphasized that the operation had been carried out peacefully and without any violence, a detail he repeatedly underlined to reassure both the public and the families of the Italian citizens on board. The flotilla, which set out in support of humanitarian relief for Gaza, had been closely monitored by both European and Israeli authorities in recent days. Tensions rose as the vessels approached the coastal waters of Gaza, with fears that the confrontation could escalate into violence. However, Tajani's update aimed to allay those fears. Facing a packed chamber and flashing cameras, Tajani began with a factual account of the overnight interception. Antonio Tajani said, "As you know, last night when the boats were already close to the waters of Gaza, the flotilla was stopped by the Israeli authorities. The boardings took place peacefully and without any violence, prepared for through numerous approach measures, starting from the mothership Alma." According to information received from our embassy in Tel Aviv, the Israeli Navy employed more than 16 ships in the operation, which will be concluded today, due to the precautions taken and in order to avoid incidents. The minister's words reflected both relief and a hint of caution. The size of the Israeli deployment, more than 16 naval vessels, underscored how seriously Israel had treated the approach of the flotilla and how determined it was to prevent it from reaching Gaza's waters. Tajani moved on to the fate of those aboard the flotilla. The convoy of 45 vessels carried international activists, humanitarian workers, and civilians. Among them were 22 Italian nationals whose well-being had become a major concern for the Italian government and the families watching anxiously at home. Antonio Tajani said, "As widely announced, once in port at Ashdod, the members of the flotilla will be identified and detained and then transferred in the coming days on charter flights to Europe." At the moment, 22 Italians are reported to have been detained, but we continue to monitor the situation. This assurance that the detained Italians would soon be repatriated offered some comfort. Yet Tajani's remarks also highlighted the ongoing uncertainty, as the legal process in Israel still had to be completed before all passengers could return home. Tajani revealed that Italy had not been a passive observer in this tense episode. He disclosed that he had personally engaged in repeated diplomatic discussions with his Israeli counterpart, Gideon Saar, to ensure the safety of Italian citizens. Antonio Tajani said, "I had repeatedly spoken with Israeli Minister Saar, asking to avoid aggressive actions and to adopt every possible measure to safeguard the safety of our fellow citizens. I am relieved to note that the rules of engagement have been respected and that, up to this point, no acts of violence or complications have been recorded in the operation carried out by the Israeli forces." His statement shed light on the intensive behind-the-scenes diplomacy that had preceded the operation. Tajani's acknowledgement that rules of engagement have been respected was particularly significant, given the fraught history of flotilla interceptions in the region. Looking ahead, Tajani outlined the expected timeline for the return of those detained. While some passengers were prepared to cooperate and depart Israel voluntarily, others might resist immediate expulsion, potentially prolonging their stay in custody. Antonio Tajani said, "As early as Friday, the first departures could take place, particularly for those who agree to leave Israel voluntarily. For those who refuse immediate expulsion, it will be necessary to await the decision of the Israeli Judicial Authority, which could require 48 to 72 hours. The clear and orderly presentation of these steps was intended to reassure lawmakers and families that the government was closely coordinating with Israeli authorities to expedite the process while respecting legal protocols. Beyond the parliamentary chamber, the scale and nature of the Israeli operation became a focal point for security analysts. According to the details Tajani shared, the deployment of over 16 naval vessels to intercept 45 relatively small boats reflected Israel's desire to prevent any confrontation at sea or near its borders. Italian officials later explained that the flotilla's mothership, the Alma, had been the primary target for initial boarding operations. Israeli naval forces reportedly employed a strategy of graduated engagement, using smaller patrol boats to surround and approach the flotilla before boarding. While critics might argue that the deployment was disproportionate, Tajani's remarks emphasized that the extensive preparations had helped avoid violence. Precautions taken to avoid incidents became a recurring phrase in the minister's address. The incident underscores the delicate balance that Italy, like many European countries, must strike between advocating for humanitarian relief to Gaza and maintaining diplomatic and security ties with Israel. By openly appreciating the restraint shown by Israeli forces while simultaneously ensuring that Italian citizens' rights were protected, Tajani projected an image of measured diplomacy. His remarks also hinted at Italy's role as a potential mediator between Israel and those pushing for greater humanitarian access to Gaza. Outside Parliament, the human dimension of the crisis played out in quieter yet poignant scenes. Relatives of the detained Italians gathered in Rome and other cities, eagerly awaiting updates. Many expressed cautious relief after hearing Tajani's assurance that the interception had been peaceful, but concerns lingered until their loved ones would be safely home. The Italian Foreign Ministry has set up dedicated communication lines to keep families informed. Officials continue to work in close coordination with the Italian embassy in Tel Aviv, which is providing consular assistance to those detained. The Sumud Flotilla episode is part of a broader and long-running story, attempts by international activists to challenge Israel's maritime blockade of Gaza. Such flotillas have historically triggered tense standoffs and, in some cases, deadly clashes. The relative calm of this week's interception therefore drew significant attention. Observers noted that Tajani's acknowledgement of Israel's adherence to rules of engagement stood in contrast to past episodes, particularly the 2010 Gaza Flotilla raid, which ended in bloodshed. Diplomats suggested that the outcome might serve as a precedent for managing similar situations in the future. The interception also comes amid heightened regional tensions and ongoing debates within Europe about how best to balance security, humanitarian concerns, and political pressure in the Middle East. Throughout his parliamentary address, Tajani's tone remained consistent, cautious, factual, and tinged with relief. His repeated references to the absence of violence were clearly intended to avoid fueling political controversy at home, while also reinforcing the message that Italy's diplomatic efforts had paid off. As the minister concluded his remarks, lawmakers in Rome appeared largely satisfied that, at least for now, a potentially volatile international incident had been diffused without bloodshed. The fate of the 22 Italians aboard the flotilla will remain in the spotlight in the coming days as their repatriation process unfolds. While some may return to Italy as soon as Friday, others could face a brief legal process in Israel before being allowed to leave. For Italy's government, the episode represents a test of its ability to protect citizens abroad while navigating a sensitive international crisis. For the families of those detained, it is a deeply personal moment, one that will not truly end until every passenger is safely back on European soil. In a world where maritime protests often risk turning violent, Tajani's announcement that the boardings took place peacefully and without any violence provided a rare note of reassurance, at least for now. As you know, last night, when the boats were already close to the waters of Gaza, the flotilla was stopped by the Israeli authorities. The boardings took place peacefully and without any violence, prepared for through numerous approach measures, starting from the mothership Alma. According to information received from our embassy in Tel Aviv, the Israeli Navy employed more than 16 ships in the operation, which will be concluded today due to the precautions taken and in order to avoid incidents. As widely announced, once in port at Ashdod, the members of the flotilla will be identified and detained and then transferred in the coming days on charter flights to Europe. At the moment, 22 Italians are reported to have been detained, but we continue to monitor the situation. I had repeatedly spoken with Israeli Minister Gideon Saar, asking to avoid aggressive actions and to adopt every possible measure to safeguard the safety of our fellow citizens. I am relieved to note that the rules of engagement have been respected and that up to this point no acts of violence or complications have been recorded in the operation carried out by the Israeli forces. As early as Friday, the first departures could take place, particularly for those who agree to leave Israel voluntarily. For those who refuse immediate expulsion, it will be necessary to await the decision of the Israeli Judicial Authority, which could require 48 to 72 hours.
Che potrebbe richiedere 48-72 ore.